So in the last class, we were discussing about locators. Total, we have 8 types of locators in Selenium, okay, where we can locate the element so that we can perform the action on the element. So what are the different types of locators that we have? We have ID, name, class name, tag name, link text, partial link text, Xpath, CSS selectors, right? So we discussed about total 6 locators. So now today we're going to discuss about Xpath. Okay. So what is an Xpath? So Xpath name is nothing but XML path. Okay. What is XML? Xpath is nothing but an XML path. Normally we call it as Xpath. Okay. So there are 2 types of Xpaths are there. To locate the element, there are 2 types of locators are there again in Xpath. One is absolute Xpath and one is relative Xpath. Okay. So how to write a Xpath, absolute Xpath, and how to write a relative Xpath, that we have to see. Okay. When it comes to absolute Xpath, there is only one way that we are going to write. But when it comes to relative Xpath, again, there are different types of Xpaths that we have to write. Okay. Different ways we can identify an element. Okay. There are 2 types of Xpaths are there. One is absolute Xpath and one is a relative Xpath. This is an important question for interviews. Okay. How many types of Xpaths are there and what is the difference? Okay. So there are 2 types of Xpaths are there. One is absolute Xpath and one is a relative Xpath. So why you are going for Xpath if there are already locators are present? So normally ID will be there, names will be there. So not every element contains ID, not every element contains names and these kind of locators. Sometimes we might need to write Xpath. Okay. So how to write an Xpath? So first let us discuss about absolute Xpath and then we're going to discuss about relative Xpath. Okay. What is absolute Xpath? Normally absolute Xpath starts from a single slash. Okay. Using single forward slash, we have to start writing the Xpath. Okay. This is one way that we can identify element on the web page. Xpath is one way that we can identify the element on the web page. Okay. So how to write? Let us see an example. Let me open a website, some sample website. Okay. Let us consider this is a website where I want to identify this username field, right? I want to enter some text inside this username field so that I want to identify this using the locator, which is nothing but the absolute Xpath. So now right click on this, inspect on this element or anywhere. Okay. So where exactly that locator is present? That locator is at this particular input field, right? So now how absolute Xpath you need to write is you have to start from the parent node. What is the parent node? HTML is the parent node. Using single slash, you have to use single slash for sure, and you have to start with the parent node. Okay. So use single slash and then parent node HTML. Okay. So you can navigate to parent and child. Okay. Normally when we're discussing about HTML, we discussed about parent and child, right? You can navigate from parent to child by using single slash again. So you have to start with a single slash and we have to start with the parent node. That is fine. Now, if you want to go to the child, so what are the different childs that are available now? Head and body. If you want to navigate to the child, you have to use a single slash again. So now this particular username field is available under body section. Now I want to navigate to body using single slash only. Okay. See, the body is getting highlighted. Inside the body, again, I need to identify there are 2 types of different child elements are there. One is no script, one is div, one is script. There are different types of child elements are there. Again, I have to navigate to this second div element, right? Now I have to navigate to single slash div. Okay. Using single slash, you can navigate from parent to child. Now, again, open the div. There are different types of elements are there. So one by one, you have to navigate using single slash. Okay. So again, single slash div, again single slash div. So here we have 2 types of elements are there again. 2 childs are there. If I put like this, there are 2 elements are getting identified, right? 2 divs are there. So how to differentiate between whether you want to go to first div or second div? I want to go to second div. Then here the index starts from 1. Okay, first element, second element. Okay, now use square braces and I want to navigate to second div element. Close the square braces. Okay. Using square braces, you need to mention which element you want to navigate. Now I want to navigate to second element here, right? And expand this again. Again, there is a div is there, single slash div. Okay, again, there are two div elements are there here. Which div element I want to go? First div. When I'm highlighting on the first div, the particular username, password, those are getting highlighted. This particular complete window. Now, second div, I don't want to navigate. I want to navigate to the first div. So here I need to give 1, right? Again, single slash inside this div. There is only, again, two divs are there. So I need to identify which div I need to go. So div of 1 only. Again, div of 1. Okay. Again, inside this div, again, I have different div elements. So which div I need to go? Again, the first div, right? Again, div of 1. Now expand this. Inside this, we have form. Only one element is there, form. And then expand the form. Again, we have a different div elements. If I want to identify username, it is in the first div element, not in the second div element. Second div element is highlighting the password. First div element is identifying the username. So now I have to navigate to the div of 1. Right? Expand this, and this is the input field where I want to identify that username is the input field and single slash input. So in this way, you can navigate from parent node to the corresponding element which you want to identify using single slash only. This is called as absolute XPath. So what is the difference? What is the absolute XPath? Absolute XPath is a mechanism to identify element on the web page, and you should start with a single slash and from parent node, which is nothing but HTML. Till your element, you have to navigate using single slash only. One by one, you have to navigate. Clear, everyone? This is about absolute XPath. So let me copy this. So this is how I wrote here like this. Okay, fine. So XPath would be created to start selection from the document node. So the parent node, we can call it HTML node, we can call it as a document node or start node or else parent node. Anything it's fine. That is nothing but from HTML, we need to navigate till the element using single slash only. That is called as absolute XPath. Hope everyone clear? Clear? Any questions? Now, what is a relative XPath? Okay. So relative XPath is something. This is also a mechanism where you can identify the element on the web page. But here we need to start with a double slash, not a single slash. Relative XPath starts with a double slash. Now here we no need to navigate from parent node. Directly element you can identify, direct element. Okay. We no need to navigate from parent node to the child element like single slash how we navigated. We no need to do that. Here we can use double slash and directly the target element we can identify. Okay. So double slash is used to create relative XPath, and also XPath would be created to start selection from anywhere within the document. Document in the sense the page which is loaded, right? HTML code that is loaded, right? That is called as document object model. We call it as a document. Okay, anywhere within the document you can identify directly that particular element. Okay, not only you have to start from the parent node. Using double slash, anywhere within the document you can identify any element. Okay, so it will normally when you use double slash, which is nothing but searching the whole page, not from the parent node. Okay, so now how to create this relative XPath? There are different ways that we have to create a relative XPath. Okay, there are different ways that we can create a relative XPath. So these are the different ways that are using single attribute, double attribute, and or content starts with. There are different ways that we can create. So we will see one by one how to use a relative XPath, how to create a relative XPath. Okay, so first we'll go with a single attribute. Okay, so now let us forget about this absolute XPath. Now I want to identify this input element using XPath. Okay, even though I have ID and name, forget about that. I want to identify this with XPath, which is nothing but relative XPath, not absolute XPath. Absolute XPath we already discussed, that will start with a single slash. Now I'm going with relative XPath using single attribute. So what are attributes here in this particular element? Class, placeholder, type, data test, ID. These are the different attributes are available. Correct. Using single attribute, I want to identify this particular element. That too using relative XPath. Okay. Now relative XPath starts with double slash. So put double slash, and then so what is the tag name here? Input tag name. Here you have to mention the tag name, and you have to use single attribute to identify this particular element. You want to use any one of the attribute which you feel unique, which you nowhere find that, right? Let us assume ID and name are not there. You want to use any of the attribute kind of. Let's say I want to identify placeholder. Okay. So what you have to put is using this attribute I want to identify using placeholder. There is no direct method to identify using placeholder, right? In Selenium. Now I want to write XPath. Using this placeholder, I want to identify the element. So use square brackets open. So what is the attribute name? Placeholder. What is the attribute value? Username. Correct. So at the rate you have to put, and then you have to name the attribute name. Placeholder, right, is equal to single slash, single, not double quote, single quote, and then inside the single quote you have to mention the attribute value. What is the attribute value? Username, and you have to close the square brackets. See, it got identified. Correct. So this way we can identify using a single attribute. So you have to start with a double slash. Relative XPath starts with a double slash and then tag name, square brackets open, at the rate attribute name is equal to, in the single quotes, corresponding attribute value you have to put and close the square brackets. So this is how we can identify an element. Okay. Now let us try to perform some operation on this particular element. We have identified, we have wrote an XPath, but let us see by .xpath we have to see, right, how to find an element using XPath, and we have to perform some action. So let us see that. So I'm going to create another. Okay, class. I'm going to name it as Xpath. Let's quickly do that. I didn't bring the charger also. That's fine. I forgot actually. So I'm going to navigate to this particular page, right? So once I navigate to this particular page, I want to identify the element using XPath. So driver dot find element by dot XPath. Previously we were using name ID like that. Now we have to use XPath. XPath. In the double quotes, we need to copy the XPath that you have written. If you see here, right side 1 of 1, right side count, only one element is getting identified. That is fine. Okay. So let us copy this and paste it here. And I want to end some text. Okay. Inside this. So what text I want to use? I want to use username. Okay. So let me run this and see whether I'm able to enter the text. Okay. We're able to enter the text using XPath. So in this way, there are different type of XPaths are there again. Currently, we have seen only with single attribute. Again, we have to use multiple attribute, how to identify. Okay. Similarly, we have different types of XPath, relative XPaths are there. So we will see one by one. So yeah, this is about using single attribute. Now the next one is using double attribute. Okay. Using double attribute, how we can identify an element. Let's say using this placeholder, let's say there are two elements are getting identified. Let us assume there is a count of 2. So again, we want to give one more attribute to identify this element uniquely. We can give any number of attributes. Again, what exactly you need to do is you have to put again square brackets open and close. Inside square brackets, you need to mention the another attribute name and another attribute value. Okay. Now let us see where this is present. Now I want to give this data test also, data test username, or else type text. Anything I want to give another attribute, I can give it, not a problem. So using slash, using square brackets open, at the rate data hyphen test attribute name is equal to corresponding attribute value in the single quotes username. Using multiple attributes also, we can identify an element. If one attribute is not able to identify the element uniquely, you're not able to get one element, you can use multiple attributes and I can identify that particular element. Obviously, we need only one element to enter text, right? More than one element, as of now, we haven't seen that scenario. Only one element we're identifying and we are performing some action on it. If you're not able to find using single attribute, use multiple attribute. That is also fine. Okay. In this way, we can identify the element using multiple attribute. Okay, I'm not doing anything because we already seen how to enter the text, right? This works same. You can try it out if you want. Xpath and provide this Xpath and try to enter some text. Okay. Again, the next one, using and. Okay. Using and. This works same like a double attribute. Okay. So and is nothing but something where we can use multiple attributes. And we are trying to identify an element where it presents both the attributes. Okay, both attributes should present. We are identifying those kind of elements only. Okay, and condition is something which attribute 1 should be present for that element, attribute 2 should be present for that particular element. Both should be present, then only we are identifying that particular element. Okay, so now the same thing, what I'm identifying now, I'm going to do it using and. Let me remove the square brackets. In between. So what exactly I'm doing? Putting and here. So at the rate placeholder is equal to username and at the rate data text is equal to username. I want the element which has, I want an input element which has both these attributes. Both should be present. Then only we can identify that element. Correct or not, Shiva? Okay, clear? So this is about and. Okay. So where you will get an element which contains both these attribute values, because we are using and condition here. When you use and, the element should contain both the attributes. Only those attributes will be retrieved here. Okay. Now if you put data test is equal to some name. Okay. Let me remove user. So what I'm doing, placeholder username should be present and data test is equal to name should be present. Is there an element with the data test name? No element is present with the data test name, but there is an element with placeholder username. Correct? So that is the reason we are not able to get the element, because both the conditions are not satisfying. We have only one attribute and we don't have this particular attribute. If both attributes are present, then only we can retrieve the element when we are using and condition. Okay. Clear? Any questions? Clear? Confusion? Okay. So when you use and, okay, when you use and if you're trying to identify with multiple attributes, both attributes should be present for sure. Okay, if both conditions are not satisfying, any one condition is not satisfying. So let's say this attribute is not present, then you cannot identify an element. We're trying to retrieve an input element. We're trying to identify an input element which contains both these attributes. Is there an element with both these attributes? No. There is an element with this particular attribute placeholder is equal to username is present, but not with this. If both attributes are present, then only we can identify an element when use and. Otherwise, we cannot identify. Okay, that's about and. Now the next one is or condition. Okay, now the next one is or condition. So now if we put in place of or, any one condition is satisfied, that is fine. We are going to get the elements which satisfies either of the condition. Either one attribute should present. Now if I use or condition here, in between this, I'm able to get the element one of one. Why? Because at least one condition should satisfy. Here I'm trying to retrieve the elements. At least one condition should satisfy here. Now we have an input element with placeholder text. See this only, this part. We have an input element placeholder username. So that is the reason we get this particular element. And we are trying to identify input element with data text is equal to name. This is not there. That is fine. At least one condition should satisfy whenever you use or condition. Okay. So now I'll get an elements with the placeholder username and data test name. All the elements I will get. As of now, we have only one element. Now instead of data test is equal to name, I'm trying to write @type is equal to text, something like this. Okay. So with these elements also, there is only one element. Now I want to identify with placeholder username, or right. I'm going to use data test is equal to login button. I want to identify these elements. Data test is equal to login hyphen button. Okay. So how many element I got identified? 2 element. So here we are using OR condition. Any one condition is satisfied, that is fine. Now there is an input element with placeholder is equal to username, which is nothing but the username field, right? And also I'm trying to identify an input element with the data text is equal to login button. There is another element with login button. Okay. So you can write an XPath like this, where we can identify more than one element. Okay, more than one web element. Okay, or condition. If any one condition is satisfied, that is fine. We're going to get the corresponding elements. Here in this case, there is one element with placeholder username, which is nothing but username field. There is another element with login button. Data text is equal to login button. So that is the reason we're able to get all the elements. Just a second. So whenever you use AND, so both the conditions should satisfy. So previously, whenever using input and I'm trying to identify an input element with both attributes should present. Now I'm trying to identify input elements. Previously also I'm trying to identify elements only, number of elements. But both the conditions should satisfy. Here also I'm trying to identify number of elements. Either one is satisfied, that is fine. Okay. So one element contains this placeholder and another element contains this data test. That is fine. If any element contains any of the attribute, I'm going to retrieve all those input elements. But when you use AND, only particular element you're trying to identify, both elements, both attributes should present only for particular element. Hope everyone clear, not confusing. Okay. Any questions, guys? Everyone?
No, sir.
Clear? Okay, fine. So the next one is contains. So what is contains? So we mostly use this particular one. Okay, contains. Okay. So how to use contains? So let us remove everything. So now let us say there is one attribute, okay, where you feel like the attribute value is very kind of a very long value is there, any attribute. Now we have to use only particular partial value of it, where you feel it is unique, where we can identify an element using the attribute value, but to only want to use partial value, not the complete value. Okay, you want to identify the element with partial value only, you feel that is unique. Okay, let's say there is an element with this particular kind of ID. So normally, let's say ID will be like this. So username, okay, some number, random numbers will be there. Username, and then like this is there. This is nothing but ID. Let's say we have an element with ID is equal to like this. We have some random value it is there. So in this complete value, these keep on changing every time. Whenever you load the page, these keep on changing every time. But let's say this username is not changing at all. Okay, now I have to identify this element with this ID attribute, correct? Now I want to use only this username only, not these things. Because if I use this, these are changing whenever I load the page, whenever I open the page. These are keep on changing. I cannot use this. If I use this, in the next time when I load the page, this ID will not work, correct? So I have to identify this particular element using the constant, like text which is constant, which is not changing. Now, out of using complete this ID value, I just want to use this particular partial text value only, which is nothing but the username. Which is nothing but the username. So how to use this? Using contains, we can use We can try to identify the element using ID, that too using this particular username only, not the complete ID value. Okay, clear? Now, this is the example that I have given. Now let us use contains and let us try to identify using this particular ID only. Okay, so normally what I did, / input using single attribute @ID is equal to, normally I'm giving like this, user hyphen name. In this way, I'm identifying the element. @ID is equal to corresponding value. Just a second, guys. Okay, fine. Now, I don't want to use the complete ID value. Some partial value I want to use, and I'm trying to identify the element. So how to use the partial value? Now, here we need to use the contains. Okay, I'm going to rearrange this. Okay, inside the square brackets. Okay, now I have to use contains. Now normal braces open and close. Inside this, you need to mention which element you want to identify. This particular input element, which is the attribute that I want to consider, ID. Use @ID. Okay, come on. Single quotes open. Now here you want to mention the corresponding ID value, not the complete value, because I want to use only partial value. Any partial value you can use. I want to identify using only user. See, able to identify the element. I'm not giving complete text here. Only partial value I'm giving. Still, I'm able to identify the element. So you have to take a partial text, which is you feel like unique, which is not changing every time. And also we're able to identify only one element here. Okay. So now, not only starting value you can give, we can give anything. I want to give ER hyphen NAME. Okay, or NA. Any value you can give which you feel like unique. So normally I'm giving like this to show you. So any text within the attribute value you can give. Okay, to identify the element. If you can see, there is only one element that we have identified. That's also fine. So now this is about contains. Okay, the next one is starts with. This is also same. Okay, now if you feel like the come out of complete value, attribute value, the starting value feel like unique. Okay, only starting value is fixed, the remaining keys keep on changing, kind of. Then you can use the starts with method. Okay, instead of contains, you can use starts with, where you can provide the partial value only, but the starting value you have to provide, not the complete value. By using contains, any value within the any value we can provide, any partial text value you can provide. But if you are using starts with, only starting value of the attribute you have to provide. Okay, now let us use to use starts with. Here instead of contains, starts hyphen with. So now why we are not able to identify, this is not the starting value. This ID which you have provided, this is not the starting value. In this case, you have to provide only starting value. Now if you provide user, it will identify, because we are using starts with. If you use contains, any value within the attribute, you can use it. If you use starts with, only starting value you have to use. Okay. Now let us try to use this and try to perform some operation. We'll do it. Okay. So let me copy this. I'm copying this Xpath. It's nothing but the starts with. Okay. So you have to read like this. I want to identify an input element where ID starts with user. Okay. I want to identify an input element where ID starts with user. Okay. Now let me run this. See, I'm able to identify the element and able to enter the text also. Okay. Okay, we discussed about contains. Okay, I want to identify an element which contains the attribute corresponding value. Now again starts with you have seen. Now the text. Okay, now the text. Text is something that we are not dealing with the attributes. Now we are dealing with the visible text, which is present normally in between the tags. We find some text, right? Normally that is visible on the web page. So we're dealing with visible text. So text is something where we can identify the element using the text, visible text. Okay. So now let's see. Let's say where is the login? So there is no element with visible text. Now let us say I want to identify this swag labs, this icon. Okay. So now this is an icon. That's the logo. That's fine. Let me open another website. Okay. Okay. Let's say there is an element here, login panel. I want to identify this label. Okay, I want to check whether this label is currently given or not. So in this case, I need to identify this element, right? So how to identify this element? So there is a ID is there, but I don't want to use ID. I want to identify the element using the visible text, which is present in between the text. For that, you can use a text property, the text method. So how to use text? So you have to use /, and then you have to provide the tag name. So what is the tag name here? Div. This is the tag name. Again, go to that particular element. And now what is the visible text? Login panel. So square brackets open and close. In between the square brackets, we have to use text, and then you have to use normal braces because this is a method. Okay, this is not an attribute. Is equal to, don't put at the rate. Okay, for attributes only you have to put at the rate, and then attribute name you have to give. For text, we don't need to put at the rate. Attribute at the rate you have no need to put, and also you have to provide this normal braces. And is equal to, in the single quotes you have to provide the text, visible text. Okay, in this way I can identify the element using text. Okay, clear? Okay, don't put at the rate symbol, and don't forget to put the square braces. Guys, please mute yourself. I'm able to hear some noise actually. Okay, fine. Okay, in this way you can identify an element using visible text also. Okay, any value can identify if you find like there is a text associated with that particular element. Normally links also you can identify using this particular text. Now, using contains, I can identify. Normally contains used with attributes, right? But for text property also you can use contains. The same concept. So use contains. Okay, in the square brackets, use contains. Normal braces open and close. Here what we did previously, at the rate attribute name, comma, the corresponding partial attribute value. But here we are trying to identify text property. Don't put at the rate. Use text, brackets open and close, comma, the single quotes, you have to mention the partial value. Not the complete value. You can provide the partial value. Any value you can provide. You can use contains with text also, not only with attributes. So I want to identify div element where text contains login. Where there should be visible text, it should be login. Login should present. So I'm able to I want to identify that particular element. So this is how we're able to identify using text. Okay. And the next one is, did I miss anything? Okay, no. The next one is last. Okay. So for example, there is I want to identify how many input elements are present. Out of all the input elements, I want to identify the last input element. I don't know what is the last input element. Let's say I want to identify the last input elements. So if you want to identify how many input elements are present, what exactly you need to write? Double slash, the tag should be input, right? And there are 8 input elements are present. Okay. There are 8 input elements are present. Here, the username is also with input tag, and then the password is also input tag, and also the login is also with input tag only, tag name input here in this case, in this example. Now, out of all these elements, and there are 5 other elements, are total 8 elements are there. 5 elements are hidden. Those we no need to identify. 5 elements are hidden. But what only the visible things? Total 8 elements out of 8, only 3 are visible to us. So out of 3 elements, I want to identify the last element. So out of all the input elements, if I want to identify the last element, I don't know which element is the last element. So I need to use last. Okay. So in this case, you have to use double slash input. Okay. You don't need to provide @type is equal to text, something like that. If you want, you can provide. If you want to identify input with type text, any Xpath you can write. Out of all the, if you're getting more than one element, if you want to identify the last element, you can identify. Okay. So how to identify? Whatever the Xpath that you have written, which fetches the number of elements, out of which I want to identify the last element which is present when we talk about top to bottom in the HTML code also. So in that case, you have to close this complete Xpath in single quotes, whatever the Xpath you write. Okay. Close with brackets like this. Okay. Normal braces. And now open square braces. Okay. And inside you have to put last, and then normal braces open and close. In this way, we can identify the last element which is present inside this particular structure, inside this particular DOM structure from the top to bottom. Okay, clear? Normally, we don't use this much. Okay, but for our understanding purpose. Now, I want to identify the last but one element, not to the last element. Now I want to identify the last but one element from the bottom to up. Okay. So when we talk about last but one, which is nothing but you have to provide last minus one, not the last element. Before the last element, whatever the element that I want to identify, last but one element. Here last minus one you have to provide. Where it is identifying now? The password input element. Previously it identified the login button. Now it identified the password input element. Okay. So here, starting, this is Xpath. We can write any Xpath. Okay. If it fetches more than one element, out of all elements, you can identify the last element. Any Xpath using attribute, you can use using text property, you can use anything. You can use any, not only double slash and input. You can use anything, any Xpath that we have discussed as of now. Okay, that's what I told here. So double slash tag name and attribute is equal to attribute value, and then out of which all the values I want to identify the last value, and then last but one, the same thing. Okay. Now, what I do is I'm going to open another website. I want to show other things actually. The same last, I'm going to give another example. I'm opening this particular website. Okay. Now, I want to identify all the input element with type text, where we can see the text property, correct? So I want to identify all the input elements with type text. Is nothing but the attribute, correct? There are two elements are there with type is equal to text, correct? There are two input elements are there with type is equal to text. This is the last element. This is the first element from the top to bottom, if you see. Now, out of this, I want to identify the last element. What is the last element here? So this is the last element. This is the second element and last element. So how many elements are here? If you see the count, there are two elements are identified. Out of two. So this is the first element, and then this is the second element. So out of it, for this, if I want to identify the what is the last element, currently we have only two. Let's see if there are 20 elements are there with input is equal to type text, right? Now out of which I want to identify element, last element. First, close the corresponding Xpath using single braces, normal braces, complete Xpath, and then in the square brackets use last like this. Now you are identifying the last element. You want to identify the last but one, which is nothing but the first element. You can use like this. last minus 2, last minus 3. So whatever the element you want to identify from bottom, that we can identify using this particular last minus 1, minus 2 like that. Clear? Any questions?
Clear, sir.
Sir,
Clear.
explain it once again, sir.
Pardon? Okay.
Explain one more time, sir.
Okay.
This.
Okay. Okay. So I want to identify all the input elements with type is equal to text. Let's say. So how many elements are we got with this Xpath? There are 2 elements we got identified as of now. So now out of which I want to identify the last element. It could be 2 elements, it could be 10 elements or 20 elements. Out of all the elements, I want to identify the last element. Okay. So if I want to identify the last element for this Xpath, which is returning more than 1 element, so close this corresponding Xpath using single braces, normal like this. Normal braces you have to close like this, and then in the square braces you have to mention the last, which gives the last element out of all the elements. Xpath that you have written, it could return any number of elements, but out of which you're going to identify the last element. And if you want to identify the last but 1 element, and you have to use last minus 1, last but 2 elements. Last from the bottom, if you want to identify the 3rd element, so last minus 2. If you want to identify the from the bottom, you want to identify 4th element, last minus 4, 3, something like that. You can use any of this method. Clear?
Yes, sir.
If you use last, okay, right. So this is about last. So the next one is position. So position also works same only. So, but here in this case, we are giving last, we are out of all the elements that we are getting, we are trying to identify element last minus 1, something like that. Now I don't want to do this. I want to identify based on the position. If it is in the first element, I want to give first position. Second element, I want to give second position, like this. Now out of all these elements, there are 2 elements that are getting retrieved, right? Right? So write an Xpath and close this with normal braces. There are 2 elements that are getting displayed anywhere within the document, not in the same hierarchy. These are not the child elements. These are not in the same hierarchy, anywhere within the document. So this input element is present here, and if you put this input element present down somewhere, the parent is not same for these 2 elements. Somewhere it is present. So out of all the elements that we got using Xpath, if you want to identify the element based on the position, it works same like last only, but we're not identifying the last element. Using the position that we can identify. If you want to identify the first element out of all the elements, if you want to identify the second element or third element based on the position, we have to give the number. So position starts with 1. Out of all the elements, how many elements that we got identified? This is the first element and this is the second element. Now I want to identify the first element. In the square brackets, inside we have previously given last, right? Now we have to give position 1. It identifies the first value. Okay. And then if you give 2, it identifies the second value. That's it. 1 and 2. So if you have 20, you can identify based on the position where exactly it is present, whether it is in the first place or in the second place or third place when we come to top to bottom approach. And this is also not the same hierarchy. So for these 2 elements, there is no single parent. Okay, it could be anywhere within the document. Okay, using the position also we can identify any element, 1, 2, something like this. If you have more than any number of elements, we can identify any number of elements. That is also fine. Clear? Any questions based on the position? Instead of position, you can identify the last element which is present using last method. That's it. Hope everyone clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The next one is index. Okay. So index and position are both different. Okay. Index also starts with 1 only here. Okay. Position also starts with 1. Index also starts with 1. When we use index, if there are more than 1 child element with the same tag or anything like that, then we use index. Okay. If there are more child elements, if you want to identify child elements, okay, when we are writing absolute XPath, if there are two div elements, out of two div elements, I want to identify single div element in the same hierarchy. Both are childs only. So there I given the index, not the position. Position works for anywhere within the document, but index works for the child elements. Okay, out of n number of child elements, if you want to identify only one element, then you can identify the child, the corresponding child using the index. Index starts with 1 here also. Let us see an example. Okay. Okay. Let's see. So this is the information is there. Inside information, I have different number of elements are there. So these are all the different child elements. Let us see the HTML code, how exactly it looks like. Okay. So this is a section where all the elements are getting identified. If I expand the section, there is H4, and then there are different UL elements are there, right? Expand the UL also. There are multiple child elements are there. Each child element represents one item. Okay. So this UL contains all the elements, specials, new products, bestsellers, everything is present. So each LI element here represents the one value. So first is specials, second LI element is new products, third one is bestsellers, our stories. So out of all the L elements, these are the same hierarchy. We're not talking about position here. If they're in the same hierarchy, out of all the elements, if you want to identify a particular element, you can use index, where index starts from 1. The first LI element index is 1, second is 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. Clear? Now I want to identify this element. Okay. So how to identify? It starts with section. Tag is section, where ID is equal to, correct? So this is a section where it is identifying all the information elements. Inside the section, there are how many elements are there? H4 and UL. These are in the same hierarchy. These two are the childs. Okay, unique childs, not the same tags. So if you want to navigate from parent to child, what exactly we did? Parent to child, how can we navigate parent to child? When we're talking about absolute XPath, we discussed parent to child, how to navigate using single slash. Right, from section this identified using an XPath with section attribute at the rate ID is equal to some value. This is XPath to identify this section. Now I want to navigate to UL. How to navigate? Single slash UL. Correct? Using double slash, I have written an XPath, a relative XPath to identify this section. And inside, I want to navigate to UL. Right? I'm navigating using single slash. Inside UL, if I put single slash again and then LI, there are multiple LI elements are there. 8 LI elements are there. If you see the count, 8 LI elements are there. Okay. See, out of 8 LI elements, I want to identify particular LI element. So based on the index, I can identify. So index starts from 1. So using in the square brackets, I want to identify an LI element based on the index value. So how to identify? I have to give. So I want to identify the second element. Give 2. So new products is identified. If you want to identify the first element, specials 2, 3, 4, you can identify any element based on the index. Okay, clear? That's it. We can identify any particular element using the index of that element if they're in the same hierarchy. If more than one child has in the same property, same tag name. So if you want to differentiate, so you can use index and you can differentiate. If there are 3 divs, you can use div of 3. So both 3 are childs using the index. Clear, everyone? Any questions? Okay, fine. So this is about index. The next ones are, so these are important. Please listen carefully. following sibling, preceding sibling. Okay, following sibling and the preceding sibling. So who are siblings? I haven't discussed about siblings. I talked about only parent, child, right? So if you talk about any HTML code, right? So for all these li childs, right? So section is a parent for UL. UL and H4 are childs. H4 is a child, UL is a child. These two childs are for a section parent. Now if we talk about UL, expand UL, there are different li elements are there. These li elements, all these are childs for UL. So this is the relationship between UL and Li. UL is the parent, Li is the child. Now when we talk about Li and Li, what is the relationship between Li and Li? These are siblings. Okay. So preceding sibling is something from the current element. If you want to identify the previous sibling, you can identify which is the preceding sibling. From the current element, if you want to identify the next element, next sibling elements, following sibling. Following sibling, preceding sibling, where we can identify the sibling elements. Okay, not only parent and child, we can identify the sibling elements also. This is the preceding sibling and following sibling. We'll see that example. So now let us see the previous example only. Out of all L elements, I want to identify the third L element, which is nothing but the best sellers. Okay, third L element is the best sellers, specials, new products, and best sellers. I want to identify the best sellers. So that's the reason I have given Li of 3, the previous example. Now from here, I want to identify the preceding sibling elements. Okay, preceding sibling elements. So what to do from here? I need to put single slash. From here, I want to identify the preceding siblings. So what are the preceding siblings? Li. Two Li elements are there. These two are the preceding siblings for this particular element. Currently, which element I am there? I am at bestsellers. Third Li element. From here, I want to identify the preceding siblings. Before, two elements are there. Two Li elements are there. Those are the siblings. Those are preceding siblings. So how to identify? Put the single slash, and then you have to write preceding hyphen sibling, single slash, preceding hyphen sibling, and put double colon, not the single colon, not the semicolon, normal double colon. Okay, you can, it's not a semicolon like this. Okay, use double colon. So what is the preceding sibling tag name? Those are Li. It could be any tag, right? Siblings could be any tag. There are any number of siblings could be present with any number of tags. Okay, so any tag name should be present. Now I want to identify the preceding sibling with Li tag. Now you have to put double colon Li. How many elements you got? Two. Out of the two elements, I want to identify the first element again. So Li of 1. Okay. If you observe here, it is working like preceding sibling. From the backwards, you are navigating preceding siblings. So the first element will be the immediate element before the sibling, and the second element would be the above that element. Okay. Using the index, you can identify. Okay. Li of 1, Li of 2. Two elements I can identify. Or else you can put like this, the tag name. Two elements I have. These two elements I am able to identify using preceding sibling. This is about preceding sibling. Okay. Following sibling, the next elements I am able to identify. So let us remove this. Hope everyone understood about preceding sibling. Now, after the third element, there are multiple elements. There are 4 Li elements. There are 5 Li elements are present. 5 childs are present. I want to identify the following sibling from the current element. The current element is Li3. From here, I want to identify the following siblings using single slash, and then following, and then hyphen, right sibling, and then double colon, and then I want to identify the Li elements. Total 5 elements are present. from the current element. 5 siblings are present. Out of which I want to identify element using any element. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Something like this. This is about the preceding sibling and following sibling. Clear, everyone?
Yes.
Okay. So now next one is parent. From we are navigating from parent to child. How we are navigating from parent to child? Using single slash. Now how to navigate from child to parent? Huh? What? Oh my god. Using double slash. Put four slashes. Okay, not like that. It's not gonna happen like that. Okay. Triple slash, 4 slashes, not triple R. Okay. Should not put like that. So we have to navigate from parent to child using single slash, and also we can navigate from child to parent. How we can navigate, we will see. Not using double slash. Double slash used to identify any element within the document. Okay, that is nothing but relative Xpath starts with a double slash y. We are directly identifying the element anywhere within the document with a certain properties. What we are doing, I want to identify an input element with certain properties with an attributes anywhere within the document. That is the reason we are giving double slash. Now, if you want to go back from child to parent, how we can navigate? We will see that example. Okay. So now I want to identify this particular input element. How to identify this input element? I want to identify using ID. Okay. Double slash input. Okay. At the rate ID is equal to. Okay. So this is the Xpath that I have written to identify an input element. Okay. What is the parent for this input element? Huh? Louder. Form. There are 4 siblings are there. Input, input, input. There are 4 siblings are there. For all these elements, child elements, the form is the parent. For this input element, whatever identified, the parent is form. Now I want to navigate the parent element. So current element is the child element which I have identified. From here, I want to identify the parent element. How we can identify parent element? Using single slash. And then previously I have written like preceding sibling and following sibling, right? Similarly, now we have to use parent. Okay, now I want to identify parent. Now we have to write parent, single slash and then parent, double colon, and then you have to provide the corresponding tag name. So what is the tag name? Form. Like this, you can identify single slash parent and then double colon, the parent tag name. So from child to parent also you can navigate, not only from parent to child. Okay. And there is a shortcut also for this. No need to go parent also. There is a shortcut also. I will tell the shortcut. Okay, what is the shortcut? Okay, remove everything. Now I want to identify the form. It's nothing but the parent, right? Using single slash, don't put parent and double colon form. Using double dot, you can identify the parent, immediate parent. Okay, again, I want to identify the parent of form. This is nothing but the div, right? Again, single slash, double dot. That is a shortcut. You can navigate any parent, single slash, double dot, again, single slash. Okay. Any number of parents you can navigate. Clear? Or else you can use parent and then double colon the corresponding tag name. And the next one is I want to identify the descendants. Who are descendants actually? So for the form, Let's not consider this. Let us go to the same example what we shown previously. Okay. So I'll identify this section. So I have different li elements are there. Previously I have shown, right? For every element, li element, we have inside we have a link where we can navigate to different page. When we click on this particular specials, right? I'm going to navigate to the corresponding link, right? So for every li element, inside li element, we have directly the link is available, right? So link is a different li elements. If you expand, li elements are available. So what is ul and li relationship? Ul is a parent, li is a. So what is the relationship between ul and a? Huh? Huh? Child, huh? Grandchild, or we can call them as descendants. Okay, descendants. So how to identify directly? So from ul to a. Okay. So we have to use again double slash, and we can identify. So now first let us identify the section with ID. Okay. So I have identified this section, and inside the two childs are there h4 and ul. I want to navigate to ul single slash ul. So inside ul, I have different li elements. I don't want to directly identify the li elements. I want to directly identify the corresponding element. Just a second. Okay. So what I'm going to do inside ul, I want to identify an element which contains. Okay. I want to identify the a element. Okay, which is nothing but the descendant, kind of grandchild, kind of descendants we can say. Okay, I want to identify the directly descendant. I want to identify. I'm not going to navigate to li and then a. I just directly want to identify an element with having bestsellers text. Okay. Now use ul double slash, and I want to identify an element a. Okay. So for every ul element inside ul, how many a's are present? How many elements with a are present? 8 elements are present. Out of which I want to identify the particular element, particular descendant. So I want to use again text contains, a contains, okay, text, comma. So what is the text? Bestsellers. All right. So this is how I can identify. Inside ul, now I'm not going to navigate to li. I'm going to identify element a. There are 8 elements are there. For every li element contain one a tag is there. So 8 elements we are getting. So out of elements, I want to give certain text property so that I can identify the element uniquely. Okay. So if you put ul and double slash a inside ul, how many a elements are present? All those elements will get. Out of all the elements, I want to identify a particular element, so that I'm using contains text is equal to bestsellers. Best. In this way, we can identify the descendants also. Not only the parent child, we don't need to navigate to each and every child. Even if you're using relative XPath also, no need to navigate to each and every child. We can directly go and identify the descendant directly from a particular tag element. Clear, everyone? Any questions?
No, sir.
And what you prefer, relative XPath or absolute XPath, and why? So what is the relative XPath? Using double slash, we are going to identify any element within the document directly. Using absolute XPath, we have to start with a single slash, and we have to start from the parent node till the element. So which one you prefer, absolute XPath or relative XPath? Why? I'm wanting to know why you are going to choose. There should be some advantage, right, using that? Because when using absolute XPath, right, like this, let's say in between some element got changed. So you can directly identify this element using double slash, right? So if you're using absolute XPath or parent node, let's say some element got in between, the developers removed the element, or developer changed the element, the tag or everything, or else they removed some element. So then the absolute XPath that we have written previously, that won't work because the navigation got changed. Correct? Correct or wrong? So that is the reason it's preferred to use the relative XPath. Okay. So absolute XPath has a disadvantages. If you use absolute XPath, if some developer got changed, has removed the particular element when they're designing the HTML code or changing any code, so that won't work, whatever we have written previously. So we have to write a relative XPath where we directly identify the element. Not exactly the directly, it is in and around that particular element we are using and try to identify the element. Okay. So prefer relative XPath. Okay. And tomorrow we are going to discuss about CSS selector. Okay. That's the end of locators. Clear? Any questions? Okay then. If there are no questions, we can meet tomorrow. So thanks everyone. Thanks for joining this session. Please watch the video again and practice. If you have any questions, you ask me. Then only I can clarify. Otherwise, I won't. I don't know whether exactly listening understandable or not. Fine. Let me stop the recording.